At my granddaughter's wedding, my name tag said, "The old lady who pays for everything." I stood up and walked out. It wasn't always like this. There was a time I thought family meant safety, meant memory and warmth and effort returned with gratitude. That's what I wanted when I helped plan Grace's wedding. I thought, this will be beautiful. A turning point. A day where all the little sacrifices add up to something good. I was wrong. That morning, I woke up early and let sunlight pour into the house Walter and I built. I brewed a pot of tea and took it into our bedroom, the one that still held the quiet, dignified shadow of my husband, 3 years gone now. Cancer may have taken him, but the scent of his shaving cream still lingered in the top drawer. His old cufflinks still rested in the ceramic dish beside my jewelry. I stood in front of the mirror and slipped into the pale blue dress Walter had always said made my eyes look like the sea. I twisted my silver hair into a chignon and spritzed on the perfume he gave me for our last anniversary. "You look beautiful, Maggie," I imagined him saying. I closed my eyes and smiled like he was standing right behind me, hands on my shoulders. By the time I arrived at St. Luke's Church, the ceremony was already humming with energy. Grace, my only granddaughter, looked radiant. When Tom walked her down the aisle, I saw a rare softness in his face. And even Lauren, with all her polished perfection and barely veiled scorn, had tears in her eyes. For that moment, I allowed myself to believe, maybe we are a family after all. Maybe the worst is behind us. But everything shifted at the reception. The grand ballroom of the Weston Ridge Hotel gleamed with white roses strings of soft lights and silver place cards. I walked toward the guest check-in to collect my name tag and table assignment. A young woman with glossy brown hair smiled as she flipped through the stack. "Here you are, Mrs. Halloran," she chirped, handing me the card with a practiced grin. I glanced down. It didn't say Margaret Halloran. It didn't say grandmother of the bride. It didn't even say Walter's widow. In elegant cursive, it read, "The old lady who pays for everything." I froze. My hand hovered in midair, the tag trembling between my fingers. Surely, I thought, surely this is a mistake, a prank, someone's idea of a joke gone terribly wrong. The young woman's smile faltered. Is something wrong? I forced a laugh too high, too brittle. Just a little mix-up, I think. I can check if there's another one. It's fine, I interrupted. I'll speak to my family about it. And I walked into the ballroom wearing that insult pinned to my chest like a badge I hadn't agreed to earn. No one stopped me. No one corrected it. Cocktail hour passed in a blur. People smiled, toasted-kissed cheeks. A few guests looked at my tag and offered tight, uncomfortable nods. Some, I think, didn't notice or pretended not to. Others whispered. I heard them. "Did you see her tag? Lauren said it would be hilarious. Apparently she's their personal ATM." The words slipped past the clink of glasses and the laughter, and then came the moment that gutted me most. Tom spotted me and waved me over to a group of guests near the bar. "Mom," he called, grinning. "Come say hi to George and Elaine Carraway. Dad used to golf with George." I approached, my legs stiff beneath me. "This is my mom," Tom said with a theatrical flourish, "also known as our family's walking bank account." Elaine blinked. George looked at me, then my name tag. His smile faltered. "Alice, excuse me." "Margaret Halloran," he said gently, reaching for my hand. "Walter was very proud of you. He spoke of you often." I nodded numbly, barely hearing the rest of the conversation. When the Carraways moved on, I pulled Tom aside. "What the hell is this?" I hissed, pointing to the tag. He rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic. It's a joke. Everyone knows you're the one footing the bill since Dad left you everything. It's humiliating." "Please," he scoffed. "Lighten up, it's a party." Then Lauren drifted over her champagne glass, catching the light. "There you are, Maggie. Has Tom been showing you off? We want everyone to know who made this gorgeous day possible." She winked, and they laughed, not with me, at me. I excused myself and fled to the restroom, my hands shaking. My reflection stared back, poised, controlled, but burning beneath the surface. I dabbed my eyes, willing myself not to cry. Then the door creaked open and just as quickly shut. "Mrs. Halloran, Maggie," a voice called gently from the hall. I opened the door and found myself face to face with Charles Whitmore Walter's old attorney. He gestured toward the name tag. I couldn't help but notice. "I'm sorry." Walter would have been livid. I nodded, lips tight. "There's something you should see," he said quietly. Walter added a clause to his will shortly before he passed. A codicil. He asked me not to share it unless it became necessary. From inside his jacket, Charles pulled an envelope. Heavy, cream-colored, familiar. I opened it with trembling hands. The words blurred as I read, but the meaning was clear. Any descendant who publicly humiliates Margaret Halloran would be disinherited. I looked up. Why didn't he tell me Charles' side? He hoped he wouldn't have to. He wanted them to love you freely, not out of fear. I stared back through the ballroom doors where laughter spilled out like spoiled perfume. And in that moment, I knew they weren't just joking. They had chosen to see me as a wallet in heels, and I had chosen for too long to believe they wouldn't. But no more. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table in my bathrobe, the name tag from the wedding lying face up in front of me, like some cruel little trophy. The old lady who pays for everything. The calligraphy looked almost elegant. I traced the gold lettering with my fingertip as if I could rub the insult away. The kitchen was quiet, too quiet. No soft hum of Walter's voice reading the paper, no coffee brewing unless I made it myself. Just me, alone, again. I stared out the window as the sun crept over the hedges Walter had trimmed every spring. The roses outside were blooming without anyone to admire them, just like everything else these past 3 years. "Have they always been like this?" I whispered aloud, though no one was listening, or did we just refuse to see it? I stood up slowly and walked into the living room, drawn to the family portrait above the mantel. It was taken 5 years ago during our 40th anniversary. Walter sat in the center, still strong, though the cancer was already creeping into his bones. I stood beside him with one hand resting on his shoulder. Tom and Lauren flanked us, smiles too wide, too practiced. Grace and Ethan, both still teenagers, stood in front trying to look serious but failing. We looked like a family. We looked happy. But now that frame felt like a relic of a lie I'd convinced myself to believe. As I made tea, memory began sorting itself like puzzle pieces. It had started just 6 months after Walter's funeral. Tom and Lauren had invited me over for dinner, a rare kindness. They'd been attentive, cheerful, filled my wine glass 3 times before dessert. Then it came. "We've been thinking about remodeling the kitchen," Lauren had said, fingering her necklace. "Nothing extravagant, just modernizing. Granite counters and island. With the kids' tuition and everything, we're a little stretched," Tom had added. They didn't even say the word. They didn't need to. I'd written them a check for $30,000 to $1,000 by the end of the evening. That was the beginning. A kitchen remodel turned into an entire home renovation. Help with tuition became brand new cars for both kids on their birthdays. Family vacations that I was expected to pay for. Plane tickets, spa days, a weekend in Napa, all funded with quiet gratitude and increasing expectation. I opened the hallway closet and pulled out a storage bin labeled receipts. Sitting on the floor like a student cramming for finals, I began sifting through bank statements, donation slips, canceled checks. By noon, I'd tallied more than $250,000 to $1,000 spent on Tom and Lauren's lifestyle since Walter's funeral. And not once had they said, "You've done enough." The phone rang, slicing through the silence. I reached for it automatically. Mom Lauren's voice, sweet, coated in syrup. "Are you home? I've been trying your cell." I hadn't even realized my phone was still in my purse from the night before. "Yes," I said carefully. "I'm here. We just wanted to thank you again for everything." Wasn't the wedding beautiful? Grace and Drew are so thrilled. I closed my eyes, the weight of that cursed name tag pressing against my ribs like a bruise. "I'm happy they had a nice day. And we couldn't have done it without you," Lauren continued. "Actually, that's partly why I'm calling." There it was. That shift, That sugary tone. Mark's sorry Drew's parents were supposed to pay for the honeymoon she began, but they've run into some financial trouble. Grace is devastated. I could already hear the words forming behind her teeth. We were wondering, she said brightly, if you might be willing to help. Just for the honeymoon. They've always dreamed of 2 weeks in Bali. Tom and I are happy to chip in, of course, especially with everything we've already spent on the wedding. Everything they spent, I had covered almost everything. I'll think about it, I said coolly. There was a pause. Well, they'll need to book soon to get the best rates. I'll let you know tomorrow. After we hung up, I stared at the receiver like it had betrayed me. Then I got up, walked to the closet, and began pulling boxes, ledgers, folders, everything. The evidence of 3 years of silence. Walter had always warned me. Tom sees money as a shortcut to affection, he'd once said, but money without values. That's a fire waiting for a match. I hadn't understood what he meant back then. Or maybe I had, and I just didn't want to see it. A knock startled me. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan standing there fidgeting on the porch. I tucked away the papers before opening the door. "Grandma," he said, folding me into a hug. "Are you okay? I've been texting." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, smoothing his hair. "Just a bit tired." He followed me to the kitchen where I made tea for both of us. His presence filled the house with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "I wanted to say I'm sorry about yesterday," he said quietly. "The name tag, the way everyone talked. It wasn't right. You noticed." Of course I did. So did a lot of people. I should have said something. "It's not your responsibility to defend me," I said softly. "But maybe it's mine to stop pretending it's not happening." He replied, his eyes sincere. "Dad and Mom, they talk about your money all the time." My heart sank. "What do you mean I overheard them last week? Dad was talking about how this house is too big for you, how they could help you downsize and manage the sale." The kettle whistled. I poured the tea with shaking hands. Michael No Ethan looked at me carefully. "Are you okay?" I met his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel unsure or weak or guilty. "I think I am," I said, "because I'm finally seeing things clearly." He smiled faintly. "What do you mean?" I sipped my tea, savoring the taste of clarity. "It means, Ethan, that it's time for some changes around here." And I meant it. 3 days after the wedding, I found myself standing outside the Oak Ridge Country Club, debating whether to walk in. Tom and Lauren were hosting a post-wedding brunch. Just a little thank you for everyone who made Grace's big day so magical. I knew the truth. It was another chance to control the narrative, to smile wide toast with champagne and polish their image. And mine, I was the bank in a cardigan, the wallet with a pulse. Still, I needed to know. Had the name tag been a one-off joke? Or part of a deeper rot I stepped inside wearing a cream pantsuit Walter always said made me look like royalty? The private dining room buzzed with soft conversation and clinking glasses. I scanned the room. Grace and Drew were chatting with his family. Ethan gave me a warm wave from across the buffet. I spotted George and Elaine Caraway again, along with a few other familiar faces. "Mom over here," Tom called, waving me toward a long table dressed in white linen and smug smiles. Lauren air-kissed my cheek. "Maggie, you look nice," she said, with that backhanded tone that made me feel like I'd surprised her by being presentable. "We saved you a seat," she added, gesturing to a spot, not next to Grace or Ethan, but beside Drew's aunt and uncle strangers. I sat politely. The brunch moved along in forced cheer. I smiled, sipped coffee, made small talk. But inside I was sharpening something invisible, something patient. Then Lauren tapped her glass for attention. "We want to thank everyone for joining us today, and for making Grace and Drew's wedding so memorable." She began beaming. But of course, she added with practiced warmth, a very special thank you to Grandma Maggie, who has been so incredibly generous. Heads turned. "And we have an exciting announcement," she continued. "Grandma will be funding Grace and Drew's dream honeymoon to Bali." There was scattered applause. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. I slowly lowered it. This was the moment. "This is the first I'm hearing of it," I said, my voice calm but carrying. The table fell quiet. Grace's smile faded. Drew blinked. Even Ethan sat straighter, eyes locked on me. "Well," Lauren said, with a tight laugh, "we discussed it yesterday, remember? You said you'd think about it." "I did," I replied. "And I'm still thinking." Tom leaned in, stage whispering, "Mom, don't make a scene. We already told them they can book." I looked at him and felt it again, that internal snap, that thread that had stretched too thin for too long. "I don't recall agreeing to fund a honeymoon to Bali," I said louder this time. "In fact, I believe Drew's parents were originally covering that expense." "Business setbacks," Drew's father mumbled, shifting uncomfortably. "These things happen," I said kindly, "but it's inappropriate to offer someone else's money without their consent. Don't you think?" Silence. You could hear a fork touch porcelain. "Perhaps Grace and Drew might consider a more modest honeymoon," I continued. "One within their means." "Our means," Lauren hissed. "What about your means?" she added. "Everyone knows Walter left you more than comfortable." Something about her tone, part envy, part accusation, told me everything. "My finances are not up for discussion," I said, "and neither are my spending choices." Tom's hand clamped around my wrist painfully tight. "Mom," he growled, "you're embarrassing us." I gently pulled my hand free. "No, Tom. You've embarrassed yourselves." I stood smoothing the front of my pantsuit. "Grace, Drew, I wish you a joyful marriage. I'd be happy to contribute to a reasonable honeymoon, but I'll discuss that privately with you, not through public declarations." Then I turned to go. "I'll walk you out," Ethan said, rising without hesitation. In the lobby, I finally exhaled. My hands were shaking, but my spine had never felt straighter. "Are you okay to drive?" Ethan asked. "I'm fine," I said. "Actually, I think I'm better than I've been in a long time." "That took guts. Your grandfather would have called it gal." I smiled. Maybe Ethan grinned, but he'd have backed you up. We stood there for a moment. Then I said, almost without thinking, "Come for dinner tonight." His face lit up. "I'd love to." That evening, we sat in the kitchen over roast chicken and roasted vegetables, simple food, the kind Walter used to say tasted like love. As the candles flickered and the walls echoed with quiet laughter, I told Ethan the truth. I told him about the codicil, about Walter's quiet attempt to protect me from beyond the grave, about Charles Whitmore's envelope tucked now into the safe deposit box at the bank. Ethan sat stunned. Grandpa knew. He really knew. He suspected, I said. He just didn't want to believe it would come to this. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I looked at my grandson, young principled observant. "I'm not going to announce it," I said. "I want them to reveal themselves completely. I want to know who they really are when they think no one is watching. And in the meantime, I live my life." The next morning, I enrolled in painting classes at the community center. I hadn't held a brush since my 20s, but something inside me, it was waking up. I called an old friend, Eleanor, whom I hadn't seen since Walter's funeral. We met for coffee. She cried, I cried. I took long walks. I opened the windows. I redecorated the guest room. And quietly, I began researching seed funding for small businesses. Ethan had mentioned almost shyly that he dreamed of opening a bookstore. "Physical bookstores are dead," Tom had scoffed at the time. "Unless you want to be broke." But I didn't think so. Not if it was done with heart. And Ethan had plenty of that. When Lauren called the next afternoon, I let it go to voicemail. The old Maggie would have picked up on the first ring. But the new Maggie, she had better things to do. Over the next few weeks, the silence from Tom and Lauren was deafening and deliberate. They didn't call. They didn't text. For the first time in years, my phone stayed silent during the dinner hour, and that told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't concern. It was punishment. They thought, by withholding their presence, they'd make me cave, that I'd miss their voices, their visits, their presence so deeply that I'd do what I always did, apologize. Write a check, make it easy. But I didn't miss them. What I did feel was lighter. Like a film had been peeled off my eyes, and I was finally seeing my own home, my own life with clarity. I started planting again. The garden had been left untended for 2 years, a casualty of grief and expectation. But now I found peace in the dirt. My roses returned. The hydrangeas bloomed. I even started a compost bin, much to the dismay of the neighborhood squirrels. Ethan came by every Saturday. Sometimes we painted together at the community center. Sometimes we just drank tea and read quietly. He showed me the business plan he'd been building for his bookstore, complete with a small cafe reading nooks and a local author showcase. It's called Chapter 1, he said, because I want it to feel like a beginning. Walter would have loved that. A beginning. Quietly, I funded the first round of seed money. Not all of it. Enough to tell Ethan I believe in you, and I trust you to do the rest. When Lauren finally did call, it wasn't to check on me. It was to inquire about Grace and Drew's housing situation. Real estate's hot right now, she chirped, and they're thinking of buying. Drew's parents can't contribute, so we thought, maybe... No, I said. She paused. No? What? No, Lauren. I won't be contributing to a down payment. Her silence was sharp. Okay, she finally said. I guess I'll let Tom know. And then came the guilt, the shift, the campaign. Small at first texts from Tom just checking in, Mom. Hope you're okay. Then maybe we can have dinner. Talk things over. I responded with polite deferrals. Soon came the emergency visits. One afternoon, I opened the door to find Lauren on the porch holding a Tupperware dish with her famous lasagna. We thought you might not be cooking much, she said sweetly. I took it, thanked her, and placed it unopened straight into the freezer. A week later, Tom stopped by with a bottle of wine. Remember when Dad used to drink this, he said, voice soft with nostalgia. I nodded. I do. He always said it was overpriced for the quality. Tom blinked, then chuckled. Yeah, he did. We sat on the patio for 10 awkward minutes. He asked vague questions about my health, my finances, my memory. I answered with grace and absolute clarity. I knew what they were doing, testing the waters, looking for cracks. They found none. That was when the tone changed. When affection didn't work, they turned to control. At my 66th birthday, just 2 months after the wedding, Ethan insisted on hosting a small family dinner at my home. Let them come here, he said. Let them see who you are without the title, the checkbook, the name tag. I agreed. We kept it simple. Roast chicken, fresh bread, a bottle of Cabernet. I wore a red dress I hadn't touched in years. My hair was freshly styled, my lipstick confident. Tom and Lauren arrived on time, store-bought flowers in hand, their smiles tight as wire. Grace and Drew came too, a bit more hesitant. And to my surprise, so did Charles Whitmore and one of Walter's closest old friends. The evening was pleasant for the first hour. Small talk, polite laughter, Ethan showing off mock-ups for Chapter 1. But just after dinner, as I sliced the cake I'd baked myself, Tom stood. We want to say a few words, he began, raising his glass. Mom, thank you for everything. And because we care so much about you, Lauren and I have been talking with someone about options. I paused mid-slice. Options, I repeated. For your living arrangements, Lauren chimed in. You've been isolated, overwhelmed. And with the house and your finances, we think it might be time to consider help. Power of attorney, Tom said, matter of fact, just to help you stay organized. The room went still. Ethan's jaw clenched. Charles set his wine glass down. That's quite a step, Tom. Has your mother expressed difficulty managing her affairs? Well, no, Tom admitted. But she's been giving away large sums of money. She's enrolled in painting classes, and she's isolating from her family. She's living her life, Ethan snapped. You mean she's not handing you money anymore? Tom ignored him. Mom, he said, turning to me, we love you. This is for your protection. We've always helped you manage your finances since Dad passed. No, I said quietly. You haven't helped. You've directed, you've expected, and you've taken. His face tightened. You're blowing this out of proportion. Charles leaned forward, steepling his fingers. I'm going to ask this clearly, he said. Margaret, do you feel incapable of managing your own affairs? No, I said, looking Tom dead in the eye. And I never have. And would you like me to intervene legally on your behalf? Charles asked. I took a deep breath. Not yet, I said. But if they try this again, I won't hesitate. The table fell into stunned silence. Lauren tried to recover. We're just worried about the money, I interrupted, not about me. Tom stood jaw clenched. This is ridiculous, no, I said. What's ridiculous is thinking you can control the woman who raised you because you don't like that she stopped being convenient. And that was when I knew. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a transaction, one I would no longer fund. The storm I knew was coming finally broke the following Sunday. It started with a knock at the door, hard, impatient, rattling the glass in its frame. I opened it to find Tom standing there, red-faced, breathing heavy like he'd jogged up the driveway, even though I knew he'd driven. He didn't wait for an invitation. He pushed past me into the hallway. We need to talk, he snapped. I stood still, watching his back as he paced like a caged animal in my living room. Ethan, seated at the kitchen counter, looked up calmly but didn't move. He just sipped his coffee and waited. What was that performance at your birthday dinner? Tom demanded, spinning to face me. Are you trying to humiliate us in front of everyone? I didn't say a word that wasn't true, I replied, folding my arms. You're poisoning Michael Ethan against us, telling him lies. I laughed softly, shaking my head. I didn't need to tell him anything. He sees you for who you are. Tom's face twisted. You're ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me. My voice sharpened, like mocking me at Grace's wedding, volunteering my money for a luxury honeymoon, or trying to seize control of my finances without my consent. Ethan stood. Dad, maybe it's time you actually listened. Stay out of this, Ethan. This is between your mother and me. She's not your mother. She's my grandmother. And I'm not a child anymore. Tom's gaze flicked between us, calculating. Fine, he said. You want full transparency? Let's do it. He pulled out a folded packet of papers from his coat pocket and slapped them onto the table. I've spoken with a lawyer, he said. We're moving forward with a petition for conservatorship. If you're going to make reckless financial decisions, we'll be forced to intervene. I stared at the papers. There it was, the nuclear option. Have you lost your mind? Ethan growled, stepping between us. You're going to sue your own mother because she won't write you checks anymore. This isn't about money, Tom said, voice low. No, I replied. Then what exactly is it about Tom? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She's confused, he muttered. She's acting impulsive. Giving away money to fund Ethan's bookstore. I believe in him, I said. And it's my money, to use how I choose. Tom reached for the papers again. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I said. And then from the hallway, a quiet voice spoke up. I can confirm that, said Charles Whitmore, stepping into the room. Tom blanched. I was here for lunch, Charles said, raising an eyebrow, but I couldn't ignore raised voices. Margaret, may I? I nodded. Charles stepped forward and placed a familiar envelope on the coffee table. What is that? Tom asked sharply. Walter's codicil, Charles replied. Tom laughed a dry, bitter sound. You're kidding. That was just some rumor, something you made up to scare us. Charles ignored him and addressed me. Margaret, do you wish to invoke the codicil? I looked at Tom. I looked at Ethan. And then I nodded. Yes, I said. I do. Charles opened the envelope, pulled out the document, and read aloud. Any descendant who publicly humiliates Margaret Halloran, attempts to exert control over her estate, or uses coercion to gain access to her finances shall be immediately disinherited. The forfeited share shall be redirected to those who have shown her respect, care, and good character. Tom stared at him. That won't hold up, he spat. You can't change a will like that. It's manipulation. No, Tom Charles said coolly. It's protection. Walter saw this coming. He tried to shield Margaret in the only way he knew how. Lauren appeared behind Tom in the doorway, breathless. I just got here. What's happening? Your husband just lost his inheritance, I said. Lauren's face paled. What Margaret has invoked the codicil. Charles explained, meaning Lauren asked, voice shaking, meaning you are no longer entitled to a cent of Walter's estate. Tom turned on me, eyes blazing. You let us believe the money was sitting there available. You said nothing for months. This is entrapment. No, Tom. This is truth. This is the consequence of years of assumption entitlement and cruelty dressed up as concern. And what about Grace? Lauren demanded. She didn't mock you. She stood by when you did, I said. She laughed with you, nodded while you volunteered my money without asking. But she's young. She can learn. Tom's hands clenched into fists. You'll regret this, he said. Possibly, I said, but at least I'll do so with a clear conscience. He turned to Charles. I'll fight it. You're welcome to try, Charles said, tucking the document away. But the courts don't tend to sympathize with adult children suing their mothers over lost inheritances. They stormed out. Ethan sat down slowly, his hands shaking slightly. I didn't know she'd follow him here, he said. I placed a hand over his. It doesn't matter. I didn't want it to end like this. Neither did I whispered. But sometimes an ending is what's needed to make room for something better. Later that evening, as the sky turned deep violet, I stood in the quiet of my garden. The roses were beginning to close, curling into themselves for the night. Ethan stepped outside with 2 cups of tea. What happens now? He asked. Now I took a deep breath. Now I rewrite my will. He blinked. I'm not leaving it all to you, don't worry, I added, smiling. I didn't think you were, he said, but I also wouldn't say no to being left this garden. We both laughed, but as I sipped my tea, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time since Walter died, I didn't feel like I was carrying his memory as a burden. I felt like I was honoring it by standing up, by reclaiming the legacy he tried to protect, and by choosing what came next on my own terms. A year passed, quietly, softly, on my terms. The house no longer felt like a tomb of old memories. It felt like mine again. The photo of Walter and me from our anniversary still hung above the mantel, but I no longer stared at it with longing. Now I simply smiled when I passed it, as if saying, we're still okay. I kept taking painting classes. My instructor said I had an instinct for emotion. My brushstrokes didn't just show landscapes, they showed weather, sky that held secrets, forests that remembered things. I sold 2 pieces at the local art fair. That made me laugh out loud. I'd spent years funding other people's dreams while forgetting I had any of my own. Now I traveled. Not extravagantly, just enough to feel new air. A weekend in Seattle, a week in Maine, and yes, 2 weeks in Italy with a senior art group where I met Henry Beaumont, a widower from Vermont who wore bow ties unironically and called me every Sunday since. I didn't know where that was going, but it felt nice. And then there was Chapter 1. The bookstore Ethan built in an old Victorian on the corner of Maple and Rose Street, 2 blocks from where Walter and I had our first apartment. He opened it on a rainy spring morning. I stood in the doorway and watched light spill across rows of hand-selected books. A mural of a whimsical forest lined the children's corner, painted by me. A reading nook, a tiny cafe run by his girlfriend Emma, and upstairs a renovated apartment for their writer-in-residence program. Ethan told me once, you didn't just invest in a bookstore, Grandma. You invested in a second chance for all of us. I cried. I didn't care who saw. The inheritance Walter meant for people who would love me had finally gone where it belonged. That July, Grace stopped by the shop with a baby stroller. Inside it was Roberta Sinclair, named after Walter. She's strong, Grace said, beaming. Stubborn. She kicks like a swimmer. Grace and I had repaired our bond over slow cups of tea, a few hard truths, and hours reading on the back porch. It hadn't been easy, but it had been honest. She no longer parroted her mother's entitlement. She showed up. She stayed late to help organize donation drives for the store's literacy programs. She asked about my art. She asked about me. That was new. That mattered. Have you heard from your parents? I asked gently as we sat near the window. Grace sighed. Mom called last week. Same script. Complaints about the condo. Dad's job. The house they didn't get. The life they were supposed to have. I nodded. I'm sorry. I'm not, she said firmly. They made choices, and I'm making mine. I reached over and touched baby Roberta's cheek. She cooed and grabbed my finger with fierce little fingers. She's got your grip, I teased. She's going to grow up knowing what respect looks like. Grace whispered. Later that day, as I was locking up, Ethan brought me a new brochure. Community outreach grant, he said. If we match funding, we can build a mobile library van, bring books to seniors and schools that don't have access. He looked at me cautiously. It's a big ask. How much he told me? I smiled. I'll match it. Grandma, no speeches, no guilt. This isn't about bailing anyone out. This is about choosing where the roots go. The next weekend, we hosted a small story time event at the shop. Children lined the rug, legs crossed, eyes wide. I read from Where the Wild Things Are, my voice shaking a little, when I got to the part where Max sails home to the place where someone loves him best of all. I looked up and saw Ethan standing in the doorway. Behind him, Grace held baby Roberta. Behind them, Emma brought in a tray of warm scones. And behind her, framed on the wall, was the first painting I ever sold, a quiet scene of a woman standing at a window, sunlight streaming through. I remembered when I painted it. I was grieving, but now I was simply living. Walter had tried to protect me with a will, a codicil, and good intentions. But in the end, what saved me was this. I stopped waiting for someone to treat me better. I decided I was worth protecting. So when people ask me now if I regret how it ended with Tom, with Lauren, I tell them this no. Because what began after the silence was worth everything I lost. Have you ever felt erased? By your own family? Have you ever had to reclaim your story from the people who told it wrong? Share your city in the comments, so I know how far this story travels. And if this resonated with you, like, subscribe, and never let someone else write your ending. This is Margaret Halloran's story, but maybe it's yours too.